We love this. We love this. Many of you took my money last night at poker. Some of you kicked my butt this morning at pickleball. So thanks for coming in and showing up. And super excited about the content today. I want you guys to think about this almost like popcorn content. Moving into this first slide here, what we do at Founderpath is when you take capital from us, we have playbooks we want you to run. And we've written all the playbooks. And I said, how can I organize this visually and quickly so everyone can consume it? Well, here it is. These are growth playbooks that companies at Founderpath take, and it's why they grow faster than their industry peers. So how do we organize these growth tactics? Well, the upper left is where any startup should start. Fast tactics that don't cost a lot. Then you're going to move to the upper right? Fast tactics, maybe they cost a little bit more, right? Or they're a bit slower. As you start to scale past 5 and 10 million bucks of revenue, then you're going to go below the line. That's when you start testing the stuff that's more expensive, whether it's fast or slow. Now, I can't cover 25 growth tactics and growth playbooks in 18 minutes. So what we're going to do is bucket these. So if we bucket these, purple is influence, right? Yellow is paid. Teal is outbound, right? Purple is BD, orange are content motions, and then red is where you need your engineering team to help drive growth. And so I've picked 9 of these to highlight today, and all these playbooks are built by CEOs that I've interviewed and then given to Founderpath customers so they can grow faster if they choose to use our capital. Here's our roadmap for the next 17 minutes. First, we're going to focus on 3 tactics related to growing influence. We're going to learn from SEMrush, LMS 365, and learn about the perfect webinar. Then we're going to talk about content. We're going to learn from Zen Business, ClickUp, and retention and Adam. And lastly, we'll do 3 outbound tactics that you might not expect would work, but they do. Outbound emails with a twist, door knocking and cold calling with ReviewWave. So we've got influence, content, and outbound. On the count of 3, I want you to just yell the name in the section you're most interested. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we had one very loud content. That wasn't fair. On the count of 3, yell out the section you're most interested in. Influence, content, or outbound. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got an even split, so we'll cover it all. I cheat. All right, let's jump in. Section 1, how do we build influence? The idea of bootstrapping your software company in the early days is not possible unless you can convince people to listen to your message without spending money. How do you build influence without spending capital? Let's first look at a company that has now scaled, right? Eugene, president of SEMrush, here's his revenue growth. And when you go back to Wayback Machine and you look at their original affiliate program, this is what it looked like. It's highlighted up there in the upper right. I'll read it to you. 40% in perpetuity. So if you bring them a $100 a month customer, they're willing to pay you 40% forever. Now, those of you that have scale, I see Mark at Eloquo, you guys should talk to, has scale. Greg working with practical founders in the audience. Boop growing quickly, a lot of great folks. You'll know that doesn't work over time because it hurts your margins, right? But it worked in the early days. Well, what SEMrush does now, and what you can see is in the early days, that revenue split, that affiliate motion generated over 40% of their MRR back in 2018, right? Back in 2018. And this is what Eugene shared with me when I interviewed him. Now, obviously, they can't keep paying 40% to affiliates on that type of revenue stream every month because it kills your margin. So what have they shifted to today? Today, if you go to their affiliate page, what they do is they pay you a one-time fee, $100 for every trial you sign up, one time, and then $200 for every customer. It's now a fixed expense. It's not a variable expense that goes over time that hurts your margin 40%. So consider that as you're thinking about gaining influence without adding to your fixed cost. How do you get an effective affiliate program off the ground? Number 2, Zensai. Here's his revenue growth. One of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the Nordics. And how has he grown and broke 30, 40 million bucks here over the past 10 years? Very, very capital light. He's raised less than 1/10 of outside capital to his ARR. So very small amount of outside capital raised. Well, this is his number 1 traffic generator. If you squint, can you tell what that is? The idea here is one way to bootstrap early and keep your equity and keep your cash is to use what we call OPT. It's more powerful than other people's money, and it's called other people's traffic. OPT. Where can you get other people's traffic? App exchanges. Now, it's very hard to rank high in mature app exchanges because there's a lot of competition. So the question is, what app exchanges can you play in where your audience is hanging out that are relatively new or your keyword is not competitive? There's not a lot of people you're competing with. Here are 14 ideas you should be thinking about. It's very hard to get to 10 million bucks of revenue if you're not using other people's traffic and you're not at least one of these app exchanges. There's something for everybody, right? Something for everybody. Let's move on. Lastly, webinars. If you guys squint closely, I'm going to break down to you guys why we do webinars at Founderpath. And you can see the registration number if you look in the bottom left here. That's a lot of people registered for one webinar, over 14,000. It's the largest gathering virtually of SaaS CEOs. We do it every month. So the question one is, how do we get the registrations? And number two is, how do we keep the attention to get arbitrage over time? We follow what we call the perfect webinar script. Now follow me closely here, get your cameras out. This is the visual playbook. Okay, across the bottom is time, and up and down is the emotional journey you're taking your webinar attendees on. You start off with a bad thing in your industry, and then how you solve that bad thing. But don't start with the worst bad thing. Start off with the little annoying thing. And as you build to a crescendo, around minute 40 of your hour-long webinar, you're gonna say, and the worst thing about the current state of the industry is X. But at my company, we believe Y. Boom, magic. Like, I'm actually getting goosebumps. I just said it, and it wasn't really even a real company, right? You will feel the goosebumps. The next thing is, though, is how many of you guys have ever been on another webinar before? Raise your hand. Be honest, everybody has, right? Most people. Don't lie, you minimize the screen, right? You go off side tasks. You also stop listening because the voice becomes the standard and you need a pattern interrupt. So if it becomes a standard, you lose audience, right? So the question is, how do you keep windows maximized and people actively listening and engaging? We follow a 3x3 grid. Here's the secret. Every 5 minutes, we're doing an LW or an I. Now, what is an LW and an I? This is the 3x3 grid. If you've been on my webinars, you will hear me say, I'm going to the next slide now. Or I've done it to you already. Look at the revenue graph. I don't tell you what's on there. I say, look at the revenue graph. If you've minimized my webinar, you're maximizing at that moment, right? That's planned. That's intentional. It's scripted. Same thing with listen to audio. You have to break up your own voice. So how do you do that? Embed a video. Bring on a co-host. Play that YouTube video, something. Unmute an audience member. And then lastly, you want to get people physically doing something at their home computer where they're on your webinar. Kinesthetic, that's the red column. So tell them, write that down. Click the button, answer this poll question, right? Or write, tell me in the chat. And if you do this LWI 3x3 grid across that up and down graph I just told you, you will keep the majority of your audience for the full webinar. They will keep coming back time over time over time. All right, how many of you guys got at least one idea there from the webinar section? Anybody? A little tactic, something to copy? Cool. That's the purpose of the next 15 minutes and the next 2 sections. I want you guys to take at least one little popcorn thing, one little tactic to try. Here's a summary. I'm only going to leave it up for about 10 seconds of section 1. Again, break your own audio, right? I just did it there, right? And it's kind of refreshing. It feels good not to have someone yelling at you for 20 minutes straight, right? Let's go into section 2, content ideas. We're gonna learn from Zen Business, ClickUp, and retention.com. Let's start with Zen Business. Here's the revenue graph of Zen Business. Right? They've doubled since 2021 from 40 million to over $80 million of revenue. Now, how did Ross do this in Zen Business? Now, Ross sold his first company, VRBO, for $3.5 billion to Expedia, which he will admit sold way early when you look at Airbnb's current valuation. But he took some of those learnings to Zen Business. He's testing early on. But what drove that crazy growth on the right side of this graph? It actually came down to majority one tactic. Can you spot it from the Ahrefs screenshot? There's one programmatic SEO term that Zen Business is using to crush it and get free traffic. And the programmatic SEO is the state name plus the word LLC. Zen Business helps you set up your companies and they sell you recurring services, a lot like LegalZoom, right? And so this is again called programmatic SEO. For you guys, you want to think about your space. Is there some combination of 2 words that when you put them together will generate, 3,000 outputs? At Get Latka, for us in our SEO, it's the company name plus the word revenue. You multiply and you get 30,000 landing pages automatically. That's programmatic SEO, right? Think about what that could be for you. All right, let's move forward. ClickUp's revenue growth. ClickUp's revenue growth. You can see it here. Zeb's built an incredible motion. You saw his banners back during COVID on buses and airports around the world, right? But what's driving a lot of his other top of funnel? Well, can you read the little gray oval at the top of this screenshot? This is one of his landing pages. Can you read the little gray oval? He launched this at the same time that Loom exited. Why would he do that? Well, what happens usually when a big enterprise company buys a company like Loom? What are they going to do? They're going to increase price. And so what does the market start searching for? Loom alternatives. So what does ClickUp do? They copy it ruthlessly, rip the hell out of it, and make it live and give away for free. That's how you become the all-in-one app. If you go look at the site directory of ClickUp and you study their HTML and just their biggest landing page on the Ahref, you will see their free tools, image generator, like these weird AI tools, all keyword optimized. It's similar to what Website Grader was for HubSpot. They're doing this, and this is where you got to bring in your engineering team to build these one-page landing page free tools for lead gen. All right, for lead gen. And he did that in 2021 and continues to scale nicely. Lastly, retention.com revenue growth. Maybe you guys heard Adam on the stage back there yesterday, but you can see his revenue growth here. Nice pivot to B2B SaaS, right, over the past 18 months. Here's his profit and loss. He's now spending a significant amount more on his LinkedIn strategy. He's going to spend over $1 million this year on LinkedIn strategy. You guys don't want to do that, obviously, but what you do want to do is let him spend the money to learn the lessons to then teach you what you can use and copy for free because it'll work because he's already tested it, right? That's called money arbitrage, right? So what's working for him? Well, it's hard to teach this because a lot of it has to do with copywriting, but I would just encourage you to be a great copywriter, you have to be a great consumer. Be intentional when you're scrolling your feeds on LinkedIn about what catches your eye, screenshot it, add it to your Apple Notes, and then come back to it next weekend when you're writing your own content. You can study Adam's stuff, but this is how we actually use that audience to get the first 1,000+ leads for our B2B, which is now scaling, right? It's not sexy. It's just a link to a Google form. And you don't have to make this complicated, right? But this is the power of owned audience, moving it from LinkedIn, where he doesn't own it, to his own wait list. Here's our Section 2 summary. That is our Section 2 summary. All right, let's jump into Section 3 here, which are outbound tactics. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this section because I think most of us are really lazy with this stuff. And as we see more AI tools going out there, we're all going to get bombarded with more and more and more outbound. So the question becomes, how do you stand out? So you're going to read this first bullet point and go, I don't need to know that. I know how to do outbound. Well, hold on a second. How many of you guys are bootstrapped to this amount of revenue only using outbound email? All right, it has his number one tactic, right? So how did David do this? Well, David is a guy that likes risk mitigation. Actually, a lot like what Jason was talking about you don't want to bet something where you risk your whole, I'm going to use the word poker stack, because David won the WSOP 10 years ago when he was a teenager and used a bunch of that money to get into SaaS. It's about risk mitigation, right? And not taking bets that kill your company. So he's done this bootstrap, but what has he done? This is what he's done. He sells a tool for text message marketing, and here's what he did. His biggest competitor was called ZipWhip on the left. He puts it into BuiltWith. In order for companies to use ZipWhip, they have to install a JavaScript code. BuiltWith scrapes the entire internet and says, here's a list of everyone with your company's JavaScript code, your competitor's JavaScript code embedded. Right? He then gets that lead list and puts it into Apollo and starts setting up these sequences. Right? So, but he was very specific. So I think where a lot of folks get lost, especially if you're trying to go the VC route, is you always want that slide in your deck about TAM and how big is your total addressable market. You really, in my opinion, want to focus on the opposite, right? Which is at the bottom of this slide in the small text. You want to actually define the smallest market possible, monopolize it, and then expand. You should really focus on just getting one potential customer's attention first. That is your monopoly, right? And then go. For him, it was very specific. Florists that have ZipWhip JavaScript installed that are actively doing text message marketing, right? And that's how he's scaled. Now he's going wider outside of florists. The takeaway I'd give for you guys is a lot of you guys are launching outbound campaigns with Instantly, right? And Apollo and all these tools. Every outbound campaign should always start with a one-on-one email that either the founder and CEO or one of your sales reps is custom writing for a potential customer. And they should keep doing that until they find themselves copying and pasting so much it becomes annoying. And then you go put that into the outbound campaign and put in the proper merge fields. Versus putting together some script you hope works, emailing 20,000 florists and getting no response. Outbound automated should always start by one-on-one human, right? The human-powered backend is what we like to call it at Founderpath. Let's move into section 2 here in the third part, VisiPay. I guarantee most of you haven't heard of VisiPay. He's bootstrapped, right, to 20 million bucks of revenue, based in the Midwest. Right? How did he do this? VisiPay competes directly with Square. Right? So it's a POS install, a bit of hardware on the upfront, and then software sales on the back end. Well, how did he do this? A lot of people would say door knocking is dead. This is what he did in the Midwest. Now on the left side, we're going to talk about variable versus fixed expenses. Left side is fixed, right side is variable. Now, when you guys are all growing and trying to break 5 or 10 million bucks of revenue early on, do you want to optimize for more fixed expenses or more variable? On the count of 3, yell fixed or variable. 1, 2, 3. Yes. We got to teach you to count to 3. No, I'm kidding. You're on it. It's great. It's great. You want variable. Jason mentioned this. Use contractors. Keep the smallest team possible. The second you build up your fixed costs, it's hard to get rid of fixed costs. Well, this is how it's performing for VisiPay. On the right side, he's got a bunch of 1099 contractors. He pays pure commission, door knocking through the Midwest. 125 folks, right? And they share 50% per month in perpetuity. Right, so this is a model where he is significantly cutting into his margin over time because remember we talked about this earlier, the 50% cut, but he's got no fixed expenses at the start. There's no full-time employees to buy computers for or onboard, right? So consider this, right? Consider this. It's also slow, right? That ramp up on the full-time on the left side, 6 to 8 months versus the right. He finds some of these folks on Craigslist with the same job listing, and it's all commission. There's no risk. So try it and see if they perform, and then move them from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen. All right, let's wrap up here with the last section of these 9 tactics. This is ReviewWave's revenue growth, right? Matt Paredes is doing a great job, bootstrapped, right? Bootstrapped. And what I'll say again, there's a lot of great bootstrappers in the room. If you want to go join a community of bootstrappers, you got to check out Greg Head and Practical Founders. The SaaStock founder community is a good one too. But bootstrappers are almost always more creative than VC-backed companies because the VC-backed companies just throw money at every problem and they lose their creativity. And in a world where everyone's doing the same thing with AI, the creative people that come up with the new ideas will win because it'll be the pattern interrupt. So what pattern interrupt did Matt Paredes use at ReviewWave? Well, here's a hint. Right? Can you build a call center in the US and have profitable economics selling into B2B SaaS companies? And most people would say there's no way that this would work. Well, he set up very, very tight economics. These were the targets that those first 2 reps had to hit. Now your next question is going to be, well, what's the average price point? If X% of those demos close, what's the average LTV, the average ACV, what's the average price point? I'll share that in a second, but that call center today is this. Something's working. Right, thousands of calls per day and it's working, right? Now, the LTV that he's selling here, I'll share with you guys, it's $35,000 LTV. A lot of people think there's no way you can successfully cold call there, right? But it's working for them because it's a volume play and they stick to those core key metrics. So proof you can launch a call center go-to-market motion as a bootstrapper in the US and have the economics work. Okay, let's wrap up here. This is section 3, a summary. Right? Section 1 is Whippy AI. Be very intentional with your outbound. It should start human to human, one-to-one. Number 2, think outside the box. Door knocking does work, especially for VisiPay. And number 3, cold calling can also work. The lesson, though, is think creatively as bootstrap founders on how to scale using potentially some of these 9 tactics. Now, I mentioned at the top of the call or at the top of the presentation, there's about 28 different ways to grow a software company. Remember that big grid? And we only covered 9 today. Each of these playbooks are 10, 15, 20 pages with case studies in each one. We're thinking about writing a book about it. I don't know, it may do well. It's basically a collection of case studies, 2 pages each, 300 pages, 150 case studies, 2 case studies per tactic that you saw. But the point is, when you start executing these growth strategies, especially when you stay bootstrapped, it's how you keep your optionality. And optionality for founders generally means happiness, like you heard Jason talking about just prior to me taking the stage. Right? How can you scale without raising more than 1x your ARR? We always debate, what does it mean to be bootstrapped? What if I've raised $1? I just like to think about capital efficiency. If you raise less than 1x your ARR, you can generally do whatever the heck you want with your software company, like Eric did at SolveMate. This is him in the center bottom, and in the upper right is Mads at Dixa. A year ago, Dixa acquired SolveMate. Right? Eric had built SolveMate to a couple million bucks of revenue. Right? He had bootstrapped it, and the deal, when they did this deal, Mads in the upper left at Dixa raised a $43 million round. He then used a chunk of that cash to go do the deal with Eric at the bottom. And one of the things I want you to study and just read is, I think a key thing to happiness is taking money out of your business, right? And making money, that's the ultimate goal, right? Family, travel, right? Do what you want. Well, Eric kept control, right? He made more money when Dixa acquired him. That first sentence, he took money from Founderpath back in May of 2021. He kept all of his equity. He doubled his MRR. He had access to all the playbooks I just showed you in our first slide. And you can see there at the bottom, they're in a competitive space with a lot of VC. right? They helped grow fast without dilution, and ultimately, though, he made more money at the exit. So that's what we're looking to do at Founderpath. We're operating out of a $145 million fund. We're writing $500K to $4 million checks into companies. We take no equity. You pay back over 1 to 4 years. If you want a 12 to 24 month interest only period, we do that. No personal guarantees, no warrants. Don't take debt if you don't understand how you're going to grow, though, right? You have to understand how that works, otherwise it can get you in trouble. So in summary, this is a slide you probably want to snapshot for all your teammates that are not here. This is everything we just learned in one shot. We talked about 3 tactics to drive influence and get attention early on: affiliate programs, app exchanges, the perfect webinar. Second section, how to get your content going and working well, like Zen Business with their programmatic SEO, ClickUp with their free tool landing pages for lead gen, and retention.com generating a 1,000 person waitlist off of LinkedIn. And lastly, outbound, door knocking, right? Cold email app on like Whippy AI, and the call center playbook. I've got this full slide deck if you would like it on my LinkedIn profile. First though, I love real-time feedback. If you learned at least one thing, one of these 9 ideas gave you an idea, on the count of 3, just clap once. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Let's up it a little bit. If you learned at least 2 things from these 9, give 2 claps on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. We'll push it one more time. 9 things. If you learned at least 3 ideas in the past 18 minutes, give 3 claps on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, and now just clap because I want people clapping at the end of my presentation. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, guys. Take care.